Him from Inside Global, and I'm really excited to be here today with two experts from our team and division on how to keep your employees happy and share some of the most frequently asked questions on employee retention. A little bit about Inside Global. We are a global staffing and professional services company specializing in different markets and industries to essentially put people to work. We take pride in our culture and our shared values to really take care of our people and drive our business forward. So, my role in the company, I am a training manager in our training and development division, specializing in building training and development programs and creating learning journeys for our internal corporate employees. Today, I am joined by Jill and Delia, who are again also experts in this field. And I'm going to introduce them and have them introduce themselves before we dive into some of these questions that can hopefully help you and your companies drive retention in your worlds as well. So Jill and Delia, if you can go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Jill McFarland. I am a Director of Advisory Services for Compass, which is Insight Global's Culture Consulting Leadership Development Division. So we really help support customers execute on their most important business results, but through people-oriented ways, whether that be through trainings or alignment sessions with leadership or full culture change transformation. The words retention and employee happiness, it's really important to me. I feel that, you only live one life, and a lot of that life for a lot of people is in the workspace. So how do you make sure that you enjoy the people that you're surrounded by and you yourself show up as your authentic self and bring joy to everything that you do? So it's something I'm extremely passionate about personally, but also professionally in the work I do with Compass. I'm excited to dive in.
And hi, I'm Delia Phillips. I'm a consultant engagement regional. I'm really responsible for the consultant or candidate life cycle and experience. So really just getting our Insight Global consultants in the door, engaging them to drive retention and performance, and ultimately strengthening our brand through care. I like to think of our team as the people. We really see that when consultants are that much more fulfilled in the workplace, they perform better, right? Which is ultimately the goal. So we're excited to be here with you all.
Yes, needless to say, all three of us are very passionate to play a crucial role in the journey that we give our employees to make them successful and overall satisfied in their jobs. So, a couple of the questions that we're going to go through are all aligned again on employee retention. What are some of the key factors and key best practices that managers and leaders can do to really make sure that they're keeping their people for long-term careers at their company? So, one of the first questions that we're going to talk about to kick us off is, what are the top reasons that employees leave a company? Us three here have really dived into the trends that we see in our organization, but also out in other organizations as well. It's attributed to compensation, a lack of feedback and support from leadership in the company in general, limited opportunities for advancement, and then inflexible work environment. So when we talk about these reasons, compensation is one of the first ones that I listed, but it's not always the main and deciding factor for these termination reasons. It's more of a secondary or third reason that we see when people decide to part ways with the company. But typically when we see this happen, there's, again, the inflexible work environments, the lack of advancement. It's all attributed to that. And when people typically decide to find another job, they are going to be looking for higher pay, of course, to help the needs or meet the needs of their lives and their flexibility as well. So I wanted to call that out, that again, it's not one of the main reasons, but is attributed to some of the other deciding factors that we see.
Yeah, limited opportunities for advancement definitely is one of the big reasons that we see. Again, my role is kind of pulling all the sentiments from the 30,000 consultants that work for us. And we've just seen a lot of trends, right? I think since the Great Resignation, we've seen an influx of attrition and just unexpected quits. I think we're in a bit of an employee renaissance to a certain degree, where the way that we retain people has changed quite a bit. And it's really about leading the person, not just the employee. So when it comes to advancement, it's really just understanding what they want in their career, co-authoring and a roadmap to help them get there. Offering constructive feedback is a really key part here, just to show them if they're far away from meeting that goal or if they're close, right? And having just that be consistent. This really creates commitment and loyalty. And I just find that people really want to be, of course, supported and empowered, but also stretched in their career.
Yeah, and I think you bring up such a great point of knowing what your people want and how do you make sure they're fulfilled and they're growing. And I think leadership plays a really critical role in
Totally.
employees' happiness. And I think sometimes it's often overlooked as, we're managing tasks versus leading the people that really move them and yourself and the team of where you want to go. There's that quote, you quit your boss, not the job, which isn't always necessarily true. But I think if you're a leader listening today, there is a lot of weight on leaders to make sure you're creating this experience and an environment and a culture where you create this level of safety and trust, where you can be honest with your people, but they can also be honest with you. I think so oftentimes, especially in the world that we're in today, we've never been busier. We've never had more meetings back to back to back. And just being able to slow down and know your people and build true trust and partnership, it's really a lost art form in a sense in corporate America. So being able to really lean in and understand your people and what makes them who they are, it also allows you to know what are those things when we talk about inflexible work environment. Well, how do you know what flexibility means to them? It's different for every employee. Do they have little kids at home and they need to get home to pick them up from school? Or maybe they're taking care of their elderly parents. They need to go to a doctor's appointment. If you don't take the time to really slow down and get to know your people, it's really hard to actually get the most out of them in the workspace. And so I think it's just important to start those conversations, and rather than getting right into the to-do list when you get on a call, it's, look at them for who they are as a person, and really understand them so that you can ultimately help them, succeed and hit their goals. So that's something that I'm always talking about.
Completely agreed. And I think it's really important to let your people know where they stand and continue to get to know them as people as well. So with
Definitely.
that being said, that kind of ties into the next question that we wanted to talk about, in thinking about creating the journeys for your people from the day that they start and creating those long-term career journeys for them. What are some common mistakes that companies make during the onboarding process that can negatively impact retention, and how can we avoid them?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, it's how you define onboarding, right? It's not a first day. It's not the first week, even. In my eyes, it actually starts from that first candidate conversation, right? It could be as early as that interview process and offering somebody a job, right? How you create excitement for them to join the team. That is a really crucial part to it. We've really deemed that pre-boarding at Insight Global, but I think one kind of scary stat right now is that 60% of candidates continue to look for work throughout the pre-boarding process. So again, I'll say that again, 60% of candidates continue to look, right? So they may have accepted your offer, but let's say the start date is 2-3 weeks out. Like, they could be passively kind of seeing what else is out there. So I think that's just a time that a lot of times gets overlooked, but it's a really crucial time to be vigilant and just place a ton of intentionality here, right? We've really found that hyper engagement, just the simplicity of communication and purposeful conversation, goes a really long way. And some sort of milestone meeting, right? Like, we actually have gotten really excited about our orientation here at Insight Global, but we've really framed that as the right meeting to co-author that with our customers if they have a short-term assignment starting or a consultant. But we actually did a study earlier this year that was really telling to us, again, on this topic of backouts, which I think does funnel into that onboarding process. But the orientation and really just the hyper engagement through that pre-boarding process, by just communicating, we actually decreased our backouts from 35% to 7% by running that orientation meeting. So that, I mean, it just goes to show it's a time that often gets overlooked. It's a time that needs to be salvaged, because what you don't want to do is go back through the interviewing process and all of that stuff, which it just takes time and energy. And ultimately money at the end of the day. So it's really just getting them connected to their leader as soon as they can, as soon as possible, and getting them excited about the work that they're going to be doing.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
another thing I think to factor into that too is not viewing onboarding as just 1 or 2 weeks. You give them their laptops, you give them, show them the bathroom, maybe give them a little bit of information about the company, but really what's their 30, 60, 90-day plan? What's happening in Q1, Q2? What's happening really within the first year? Do they have all the tools and resources to set them up for success? Are you engaging them with the right stakeholders and partnerships? Do they know the foundation of what your business does? Do they know how to reach out and to who to reach out to? So thinking about
Yeah.
being intentional about their onboarding process, not just within the first week, but really within the first year as well.
And I think it's so true. I love how you spoke about Delia, like prior pre-boarding, and then Alicia, it's up to the year that they're starting a job. It's a really big deal. And I know at Compass, we've done a lot of research about the correlation of onboarding and retention. And there's definitely a relationship there. One of the stats to call out is that 93% of new hires said their onboarding process determines whether they stay. That's a pretty big number. And 77% of new hires determine whether or not they're going to stay in the first 6 months of a job. And so there's a really big weighted responsibility to give them that incredible experience, but also be really honest and truthful about what they're walking into. And so there's a couple things that we like to recommend to really combat those statistics. And I know it's been spoken about a little bit, but there's really 3 elements to successful onboarding: administrative, technical, and cultural. So yes, do they have their laptop? Do they know where to go? Do they have their badge access? Do they have the skills to do the job? But then do they know the environment that they're walking into, and the culture and the ways of working and the behaviors and the norms, which oftentimes is overlooked, but it's really important. I mean, you think about the first time you started, with Insight Global, you're like, okay, how do things go here? It's really nerve-wracking. I don't know about y'all, but I was up at night, thinking about the conversations I had, or was I dressed okay? And so I think it's not thinking too much into the importance of getting into the details of what's wonderful about working at this organization, but also what are some challenges that we're facing. We hired you for a reason, and this is what we're facing, and some of the challenges that we have. And we're bringing you along for the journey to help us improve and get better. And so even getting as granular as, how you conduct meetings and the PTO policy, what gets you in trouble at work, but what gets you rewarded and promoted. And then how do we socialize? Do we do anything, as a team inside or outside of the workspace? So just being able to slow down and be intentional early on, so that, within the first year, they feel like they can get to work and be productive and feel like they're adding value. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think culture is such an important part that often gets overlooked. Like, I know we obviously talk about expectations, but that cultural one is definitely my favorite, because just the intangibles, right? It's the stuff that we've had folks unfortunately get terminated for just not knowing the cultural norms of the team, and because it wasn't covered in the interview per se, or maybe expectations weren't clear, right? Expectations is the how do you set expectations? Because it does take shape and form differently in every single organization. I think something that I would be remiss if I don't say is just the to-do list, right? The simplicity of equipping someone with a to-do list on a first day is not the same as telling them what they're working towards, right? And telling them what their company's priorities are, or what their team's involvement is towards chipping away at the greater mission. Like, actually being able to slow down there is so important. I think, especially when you just go double down on the performance expectations too, like, a lot of people just want to perform well. People like doing things that they're good at. And of course, usually that's covered in an interview process, but like, again, I think it works best when that's also kind of doubled down in that first week of assignment or job, or maybe the week leading into that, just to, again, create that excitement, but actually slowing down with them. Of course, in culture, but also just the performance, right? Like, what is this first week going to look like? What is your training going to look like? What do our team meetings look like? How long is the ramp up period going to last for, right? Is it 2 weeks? Is it 5 weeks? What do my expectations look there? And how does that differ from when I'm up and running, right? When is my first performance review? What are we anchoring back to as, like, how are you defining success in that first performance review, right? People just want to people really crave where they stand, right? If they're doing well, it's an opportunity to give positive praise always. I just think it goes such a long way.
And I think as a leader, it is really hard to give tough feedback. It just is. It's really, really hard. And it's even harder when you don't have that foundation of trust. And I'll probably talk about trust till I'm blue in the face, but I think it is so critical to just get the most out of your people. But it really is important to be intentional about really building that level of commitment and trust. So when you set expectations, or you give tough feedback, they take it really well. We always say clear is kind in business. I think it means a lot. And again, it's better received if you've got that relationship. And there was actually a study done by Gallup that compared people at low trust companies to people at high trust companies. And what they found was that there were 13% fewer sick days, 50% higher productivity, 74% less stress, 29% more satisfied with life, and 40% less burnout at higher trusting companies. So that's pretty huge when you think about the impact trust really makes. But it's not linear. I think oftentimes we think of it as, very black and white, this is what it is, but ultimately it's really dimensional. And we like to teach these 4 pillars of trust, and really making sure that you're going a little bit further with your people. So there's things like reliability trust. Can I trust my people to do the job? There's relationship trust. Do we have that relationship there? And then there's also things that is around motive. Do you understand where they're coming from? Are they coming from a good place? Are they focused on growth and development? And I think it's just a really good exercise if you're a leader, joining us today, to think about your level of trust with your people. And if you're lacking trust with them, maybe why is that? Is it a competence thing? Is it a relationship thing? Is it reliability? What does that look like? And then you can really work towards, improving some of those relationships and making some of those stronger connections.
Yeah, I think one other thing, just to tie a bow on expectations, right? Because I think it's a word that keeps coming up. I think the one other thing outside of technical and administrative and cultural, of course, is just when I can speak to the temporary staff, right? The consultants, the contractor population. One other really important time to just be clear about is the end of assignment, right? Like that, I think historically there's been a posture of like, you know what, if we don't communicate it, maybe they're not going to know, right? Or it's kind of this scary feeling of like, they may leave for other work. So it's better to not know. But we just have seen such a difference in commitment through the end of assignment. Our consultants are that much more committed through the end of assignment to help with knowledge transfer, right? If they know what that date is. So again, just a really crucial time to start having that conversation 6 to 8 weeks before the end of assignment. So that way it's not a week before and you're like, hey, next week's your last week, right? Because these folks, of course, it's their livelihood. If you're putting so much investment in their fulfillment and belonging in the workplace, like do them a solid, talk about the end date, get ahead of that conversation. So that way they're not left in the dark.
Definitely.
Completely agree. And I think these are all really great things to think about when onboarding, what not to do, what could you evolve, could you evaluate. It's also important to think about that every year you should be assessing how you're onboarding and training your people and how you're really implementing initiatives to keep them satisfied and lower that retention too. And a really great point that I think we talked about is the culture fit and really how to drive your culture. So actually tees us up perfectly for the next question I wanted to talk about is how does company culture impact employee retention?
Yeah. Culture is a really big word. We always say, defining it, it's like grabbing smoke. How do you simplify culture? It's very complex. And so Compass's definition of culture, just to get us a little bit grounded and at least how we view it. Culture is what a group has learned about how to fit in and be successful that influences how we think, behave, and interact with others. And so I think people really think sometimes culture is this like soft, fluffy stuff. Do we have kombucha on tap? Do we have happy hours? If we're doing all those things, we have a great culture. When really it's about how people are working in the environment. How are they interacting with one another? How are they driving towards results? Are they being productive? Are they constructive, with feedback and how they're going at things and if there's a disagreement? And so that's really what it's about. When you feel like you're adding value to the business and you're achieving your goals and the overall team's vision and goals, it becomes a little bit more enjoyable. But we like to call it, and it's not bad to have a kombucha on tap or to have happy hours, but sometimes those are band-aids, and that's not going to get to the root of, well, why is it that we're doing the things the way that we're doing them? So it's really being able to slow down and kind of pull that apart, and just think about that as you're thinking about your own culture and your team and how people interact and what are the ways of working here. And it's about being honest and being transparent and creating that environment. We're going to say it again, where expectations are clear. So I think it's just really, really critical that you understand the ways of working of your people and your team. And if you feel that they aren't maybe exuding the right behaviors that you want to see and you want to see this shift, it's being able to unwind a little bit and get really honest with your people and understand the why and the root and maybe why people are behaving the way that they're behaving. So I just think it's, it's one of those situations where when you think about culture in the workplace, it means a lot of different things to a lot of people. And we always say businesses don't exist to have a great culture. They exist to serve a purpose. Your culture is either helping you get there or it's hurting you. So where do you fall, in line there?
I love that. I think when companies also just set guidelines for successful open communication, employees are more likely to feel aligned and also just engaged in the workplace. And that is such a huge contribution to retention. We've pulled so many sentiments from our consultants. Again, those who are leaving, why are you leaving? Please let us know so we can again just continue to craft what our consultant journey looks like. But the biggest one is engagement. It's a massive reason why folks leave. They want to be engaged with. They want to have quality dialogue with those who they're reporting into, and the team that they surround themselves with. Of course, it can be personal dialogue too. Like I think we're talking a lot around. Of course, it needs to be professional development, but also it's okay to talk about personal stuff too with your team. But also, just how's your experience? Like really go there. That would be my 2 cents is going there with your team. How is your experience? Are you happy, right? Is the work you're doing still aligned with your goals? Like it kind of feeds into the same dialogue Jill was hitting on, where sometimes they're the stickier questions to a certain degree, right? But usually they yield the best open conversations that actually let you into where your team feels and where their hearts are. And that really is the good stuff that then can give you the ammo to hopefully prevent them from leaving in the future.
Yeah.
100% agree. And I think it's really important that the drivers of the culture change or the culture that you want for your company comes from leadership. And Insight Global is a living example of going through culture transformations and really putting our people first and really relying on the foundation of what we want our culture to be through our shared values and purpose. And it starts with leadership. So that leads us into our next question of truly how does leadership in organizations drive our ability to retain talent in organizations?
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit about leadership and different nuances throughout this conversation. And again, just to get everyone grounded, apparently I love a good definition, but I do love this definition by a woman named Doris Kearns Goodwin. She's a famous author. She's studied incredible leaders throughout her lifetime, people like Abe Lincoln, JFK, written many books. And her definition is leadership is the ability to use our talent, skill, and emotional intelligence to mobilize people to common achievement. And what I love about that definition is the word mobilize. It's taking someone from point A to point Z and showing them that they have so much more potential and we're on this journey together. And it's being able to inspire and encourage and motivate, but also course correct when course correct is needed. So I think it's just something that word just stands out for me because oftentimes it's that difference between being a leader and a manager. Are you managing the tasks and are you jumping on a call and just getting into it? Or are you making sure you're tying everything back to the vision and getting people along for the journey and mobilizing them to where you really, really want to be? And I just think oftentimes it's one of those cases with leadership. It's like, well, what do my people really want? And they want to be inspired and they want to be happy in the workplace. And again, that's a byproduct of being able to do that. So,
yeah, I think there's no doubt that great leaders, have the power to impact an employee's fulfillment in the workplace and their ability to do their job well, of course, but like their fulfillment, their sense of belonging, and their loyalty. That's
yeah.
all tied together. I think about the hard moments maybe in my career, right? And without the strong leaders that I've had, I mean, who's to say if I would be here today, right? Like it's just the leaders that you work for has such an effect on your performance, your willingness to stick through the hard things, right? Like I think the great leaders that I've worked for, it's the ability to inspire, right? The ability to storytell and motivate, gets just the team really jazzed up. But also just when leaders go as far to help you professionally, of course, but personally. I
Mhm.
think something that again, when I think about these great leaders, it's just they celebrate the life milestones as well as the work milestones, and that is just so personal. And again, that attributes 100% to retention.
Yeah.
Agreed. And when I think about what leaders can do to really help drive that retention, it's also keeping in mind how they can really impact and adhere to flexibility for their employees, whether they're in a hybrid environment, whether they're remote, whether they're commuting in 2 hours to the office, if they're 3 days in the office, 5 days in the office too. Jill alluded to this a little bit earlier, but it's really important to get to know each and every one of your people. Do they have kids at home? Are they pet parents? Are they caring for a loved one at home? Again, do they have a long commute, or are they fully remote in a completely different state or country while your team sits in office too? It's very important to consider those things, and no one direct report or no one of your people is going to have the same circumstances too. So where can you provide incentives? Where can you provide initiatives and really make sure that you're giving that flexibility? If someone has to go to their child's dance recital at 2 o'clock, or they have a doctor's appointment, or they have to leave work for any reason or take a day off, making sure you're understanding and providing that support too. And a lot of times when job seekers are looking for joining a company, or we're looking for talent to join our company too, making sure that we're aligned on flexibility. What can we accommodate? Is it a different schedule? The benefits that you have to offer, things like that too, and really connecting those points, especially if your people aren't sitting local to you, where you can't walk 10 feet away from them as well. Thinking about how you can engage with them in a hybrid or remote environment, whether it's something as simple as a virtual happy hour, or making sure that you're having face-to-face video calls, actually looking at the body language, making eye contact. It's not always easy to do that, but thinking about small things like that can also help their flexibility and also their connection and that engagement to you as well. Going off of that too is making sure that wherever they are, again, whether they're local to you, remote, hybrid, whatever it may be, that you're finding ways to create that culture of praise and recognition to ensure that they feel that the work that they're doing matters. We talked a little bit about this throughout this conversation, but that is one of the biggest reasons why we see people part ways with companies. They don't feel like their work is being recognized. They don't feel like they're being fairly compensated for that work. They don't feel like they're making that impact. So how can you really make sure that you're shouting them out, whether it's in a Teams group chat or on Microsoft Teams or Slack or whatever you're using to, making sure that you're giving that surprise praise where they're not expecting it as well. But it all kind of flows into that flexibility, that engagement, that connection that you're creating, to continue that culture and continue that leadership that we've been talking about as well. So I wanted to touch on that in that point too. Anything to add?
Awesome. Yeah, I think praise and recognition, I could talk about praise and recognition all day, just like I can talk about trust, but it is such a powerful tool in your tool belt that can really move your people. And who doesn't love good praise or good feedback? And I think it's so interesting because culture is actually built through shared learning. And so there's also a really big opportunity to drive a shift in behaviors through praise and recognition. So for example, if you have a team that's maybe working in silos, you have a cross-functional team, they're heads down, they're just doing their thing, but you really want to move it from working in silos to being really collaborative. And you see someone on the team that's doing that. They're reaching across the aisle and they're asking for help and support and they're pulling them into initiatives or whatever it is. It's being able to seek that out as the leader and then calling it out and praising the heck out of it and recognizing it in front of the rest of the team, because it also feels good when you're getting praise and all your peers are hearing it. But if it maybe that person doesn't want to get praised in front of the whole room, that's also knowing your audience and your people. So if they don't, there's other things you can do. Like I know personally before I've written letters to members of my team, and I've actually written letters for family members of my team members, thanking them for being such a support and an advocate for their partner, so that they can show up and be the best version of themselves. And of course, the employee ends up finding out about it, that they got a letter from their spouse's boss. But that's just something else. I know there was something in the chat around recognition and praise, so that's a little example. But find those moments, and it is a skill as a leader. You have to look for it. But then think about the behaviors that you're trying to drive on the team behind that praise and call it out. And you'll start to see this evolution of people wanting to do things in that way. So just to kind of double down on that point, I get really excited when it comes to praise. So
Yeah, I think I just identifying strengths is a big part of it. Like to your point, you're acknowledging strengths through praise and recognition, but I think what great leaders also do is they're like good talent magnets, right? Like they're able to identify your strengths really well and put you in places to do that work. That is so crucial by just investing in their success. I think about this book. It's called Multipliers by Liz Weissman, and she teaches leadership around the world. And she has this concept of diminishers versus multipliers. Diminishers, they really squash innovation, right? And multipliers identify someone's strength, right? Like we're talking about, they really lean into that strength. They put them in positions to do that work. So they're getting that praise that you talked about, Jill, and they're more fulfilled because people like doing things that they're good at. And the team's excelling, right? Like this has tremendous impact on organizations' revenue and productivity. So it works, right? But
yeah,
we can't skip over praise and recognition, that's for sure.
yeah.
100%. And I think if people really feel like they're truly a part of the mission, they're truly a part of the drivers of the change and the results that the company is seeing, they're more likely to stay long term with your company as well. So, switching gears a little bit, as we've talked about culture and leadership and connection and engagement, all these wonderful things, let's talk about ongoing development journeys. What happens after the onboarding phase? What happens after year one? How can ongoing learning and development opportunities help drive employee retention?
Yeah, we use this word journey quite a bit, right? But I think it's so relevant. And I think it's just creating these custom learning journeys for your hires and showing them a really clear path to growth, right? Being able to offer an employee a future within the organization goes such a long way. And again, it creates that loyalty and that commitment when they feel confident in their path forward and that journey forward with your organization. So I think start the conversation early, right? Like we've talked a lot about setting expectations, hyper engagement, positive praise. Like I think first and foremost, early on, it needs to be understanding your team's motivators. If you have a new hire join your team, what makes them tick? How do they like to be coached, right? Like that's something that I feel like we could have plugged in before, but this whole concept of coaching, everyone likes to be managed and coached differently. And I think that is so crucial to understand how your team likes to be coached. I have had a lot of people tell me, I really I best respond well to positive praise, right? But I'll never forget it. I had one employee underneath me. He was a former college hockey player. So it really wasn't that surprising when he was like, I really like constructive criticism. I want you to be hard on me. And that hit me, of course, but I think it just is a part of the sentiment that everyone is coached differently. So you have to make it a personalized journey and understand where they want to be in 5 years. It's okay to kind of acknowledge that they may not be on your team forever, but if you could be someone to help them drive forward or again, put them in places to develop their skills in the areas that they want to be, that is what leads to retention. If you're in sales, right, and your team member wants to be in payroll, right, again, how do you be the connector? Because I'm of the mindset that advocating for your team members always comes around. But I think it's okay. I think a lot of leaders shy away that like if what you're saying doesn't agree with what my expectations are, I don't want to address it, right? And I think it kind of feeds into the same concept of it's better to address things head on, right? Because then one, maybe you can come together and figure out like a middle ground for how to keep them on your team, but maybe put them in more pockets to have that outlet and keep them around longer. Or maybe it's just, again, keeping them with your organization to connect them with the right people.
Definitely. I think that being the connector, I love that. And I love that book that you called out too about being a multiplier versus a detractor. And I think it's being able, and how do you do that, right? How do you really slow down and understand your people? And using that word trust again, it's really leaning in and having a relationship to talk about it. What is the thing that matters most to them? Some people want to have a future in leadership. They want to be a people leader, but some people don't. They just want to be
Right.
masters at their craft. They want to be really, really, really good at a skill. So is there something that you can provide as the leader, whether that's training or further development in that skill? Because that's what makes them tick, not being a manager or a people leader. They don't want to do that. And that's okay. But everyone wants to grow at some point, so that they can have more fulfilled lives outside of the workplace, and go back and be fully there for your family and your friends. And again, that feeling of fulfillment. And I truly feel that the way that you show up to work and the way things go at work, it directly shows up at home. And I don't know about you all, but I call it like the Saturday morning test. If you wake up on Saturday morning and you're stuck in your to-do list from Friday, I'm not good with that. And so as a leader, I'm always like, okay, what do I have to do? Was there anyone in this week that I feel, is going to have a Saturday to-do list, is going to wake up and their mind's going to be at work? What can I do intentionally to reach out to them proactively and get on the same page in whatever way that needs to be, so they can close the chapter of the book Friday at 5 and go be present in their lives and be happier, so that they show up happier, and you can retain them. So, just something that I've always thought about. And it's not perfect. There are Saturdays where I wake up and I'm stuck on Friday. But if you can try to eliminate that, it calls for a better weekend. So
100%. And I think it's important also to recognize that, to Jill's point, some of your people may not want to become leaders, and that's completely okay. Your people can continue to grow personally, professionally, and financially in an individual contributor role. And we should encourage that. We should encourage them to explore their career opportunities, but also provide visibility to what those opportunities are. What do they need to do to get to that next level? What do they need to do to get promoted or move to a different department? To Delia's point as well, making sure that their opportunities are open to them so they can continue to grow in your companies. And I'm sure we can all say, of course, we'd love for them to shop around in your companies versus, parting ways. But if that's the best opportunity for them as well, making sure that you're supporting them. And at the end of the day, when we've talked about everything we have today, again, culture, engagement, connection, leadership too, it's all about keeping our people happy, what's best for them, and where we can support that journey and growing our people and growing our companies as well. So this was a really, really great conversation. I think this is also a great opportunity for our leaders out there and our job seekers to take a step back and just reflect on some of the things that we've talked about. What can you implement when you leave here today? What can you think about doing better? What can you evolve? When we think about our training and development programs, our training programs evolve every single year. Our development programs, our culture programs, everything that we're doing is to scale the business, but also make sure that we're meeting our people where we are. Are there new business needs? Are there new information and data that we can use to help drive down retention? We're very intentional about that and making sure that if there's new trends that are coming up, how are we addressing them? How are we making sure that we're providing that flexibility, that visibility on career opportunity, new initiatives around compensation as well, all really important things to think about. So thank you all for joining us here today. It's been amazing sitting with these two experts here to talk about this important topic. Please visit our website, and we hope you all have a great day.
yeah. Thanks, Alicia. Thanks, Delia.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.